Hello, everyone. We are delighted to have you all here. And to get this seminar started, I would like to introduce you to the Deputy Director of UCAR's Scientific Partnership and Services Center, as well as CPAESS, Cindy Briere.
Thank you very much, Dawn, and welcome everybody. We are really delighted to have you attend our CPAESS Discovery Seminar series. Our CPAESS scientists do everything from explore ocean depths, flying to hurricanes, heliophysics, modeling, and unraveling the mysteries of the Arctic. And we really want to share this with the public, our UCAR NCAR community, and our colleagues at universities across the globe. To orientate you, look just below your screen, at the bottom of your screen, and you would see a Slido. That is what we're going to use to pose questions for our speaker. You can pose these questions anytime during the seminar, but we will answer them at the end of the seminar. Today, it is my sincere pleasure to introduce you to our speaker, Lynne Hodge. Lynne joined UCAR.CPAESS as a scientist in 2021. She works for the Marine Mammal and Turtle Division of the NOAA Southeast Fisheries Science Center. She has enjoyed using bioacoustics for the last 20 years as a tool to learn more about marine mammals. Recently, she has turned her focus to the impact of chronic anthropogenic noise sources in the hopes to protect these mammals. Her talk today is on shipping noise in the Gulf of Mexico between 2010 and 2021. So welcome, join me in welcoming Lynne to our seminar series today, and over to you, Lynne.
Thank you. Just see if I can share that. Okay, hopefully you can all see my screen now. Thank you so much for that introduction and for giving me time today to talk about the work I've been doing on shipping noise in the Gulf of Mexico. Before I begin, I'd like to go ahead and acknowledge my co-authors who are listed here on this slide, who are from the NOAA Southeast Fisheries Science Center and Scripps Institution of Oceanography. So I know my presentation is on shipping noise in the Gulf of Mexico, but before we take a closer look at that, I wanted to first talk to you about why sound is important in the marine environment. For marine mammals, sound is the primary sensory modality. This is because acoustic energy propagates in water more efficiently than almost any other form of energy, making the use of acoustics ideal for the aquatic environment. Because water is more dense than air, sound travels faster and farther in the ocean. In fact, sound travels about 4.3 to 4.5 times faster in water than it does in air. And while light is poorly transmitted in water and only penetrates a few hundred feet, low frequency sounds can travel hundreds to thousands of kilometers in water. These facts highlight the importance of sound for animals in the marine environment and explains why they have evolved many different ways to use sound. But why exactly do these animals, or what exactly do these animals use sound for? Well, the marine mammals rely heavily on sound to carry out critical life functions. They use it for navigating, foraging, communicating, and avoiding predators. An increase in ambient or background noise can have acute, chronic, and cumulative effects on these animals. Such increases in noise levels can cause behavioral changes, reduced foraging success, reduced reproductive success, masking of communication and environmental signals, habitat displacement, hearing loss or impairment, stress, or even death. The level of impact is dependent on several factors, including the characteristics of the sound, propagation conditions, distance between the animal and the source, and the animal's behavioral state. Low frequency noise sources, such as those from shipping, can propagate, like I said before, over hundreds to thousands of kilometers, and this can have a large impact on chronic noise levels, which can ultimately lead to negative impacts on marine mammals for the reasons just described. The work I am presenting today is part of a project that gathers data to contribute to our understanding of how cetaceans and noise vary over time and space in the Gulf of Mexico. And in case you're wondering, cetaceans found in the Gulf include the whales and dolphins. This project is also gathering data to help find ways to reduce impacts of human-produced noise on marine mammals, and this does include noise from shipping. Data collected for these projects is ongoing, but today I'll be presenting 11 years of data that were first collected starting in May of 2010, which is right after the Deepwater Horizon explosion. So the Deepwater Horizon explosion occurred in the northern Gulf of Mexico on April 20th of 2010. This explosion resulted in the largest accidental marine oil spill in US history, spilling approximately 134 million gallons of oil. And to give you a sense of scale, the second largest spill in US history, which was from the Exxon Valdez in 1989, spilled 11 million gallons of oil. This amount of spilled oil from the Deepwater Horizon led to damaging impacts to the Gulf of Mexico ecosystem, including the cetacean species found there. Impacts included part of their habitat being covered in oil and reductions in population size. Given that marine mammals are long-lived animals, ongoing health and reproductive effects are expected. And because of these impacts, science and restoration projects began in the Gulf that were focused on reducing the impacts of human activities on oceanic cetaceans to enhance their conservation and recovery. Some ways that can help reduce these impacts and thus speed up the recovery include reducing fishery entanglements and reducing ship strikes, as well as improving their habitat, which does include reducing man-made noise. So now let's take a look at which marine mammals inhabit the Gulf of Mexico. So the Gulf of Mexico is home to 21 cetacean species, including the endangered Rice's whale and sperm whale. Let's take a quick look at where these species have been found to occur in the northern Gulf as found by ship-based and aerial surveys. So here we have sightings of Rice's whale as seen by the red dots. I have color coordinated the species names on the left with the sighting location marker colors in the figures. Also, the black star is the location of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Now you can see sightings of sperm whales, also in red. Then we have sightings of dwarf and pygmy sperm whales, and these are both in red because these are difficult to distinguish visually in the field, so they've been lumped together. We've got 3 species of beaked whales seen here: Blainville's, Cuvier's, and Gervais beaked whales. Short fin pilot whales, killer whales, false killer whales, pygmy killer whales, melon-headed whales, common bottlenose dolphins, Rizzo's dolphins, rough-toothed dolphins, Fraser's dolphins in the red and Clementi dolphins in the blue, pantropical spotted dolphins, spinner dolphins in the red and striped dolphins in the blue, and then Atlantic spotted dolphins. Okay, so now let's turn our attention to soundscapes, or the acoustic environment in which these animals live. Soundscapes are a combination of all sound sources in the environment. They are made up of biological sounds, non-biological natural sounds, and anthropogenic or man-made sounds. Marine animals all contribute to the biological aspect of marine soundscapes, and they're represented in this figure with the blue sound waves. Earthquakes and weather events are examples of non-biological natural sounds, and these can be seen in the figure as the green sound waves. And then the anthropogenic sounds are shown in orange, and these include sounds from ships, air guns, echo sounders, oil drilling, when oil production, underwater explosions, pile driving, and wind farm development. The Gulf of Mexico is actually one of the world's noisiest sites at low frequencies, and its high ambient noise levels are dominated by shipping traffic and seismic surveys for oil and gas exploration, which are both low frequency anthropogenic noise sources. This talk will focus on ship noise because this is one of those dominant anthropogenic noise sources in the Gulf, and it is important to understand how much these animals are exposed to in order to help reduce the impacts on them and help the populations recover. So ship sound, and this does include sound from sources including the engine, propeller, and cavitation, can occur for many hours at a time. And in fact, at lower frequencies, particularly frequencies less than 150 hertz, noise from global shipping can occur near continuously. So while you see elevated low frequency noise levels from distant ships occurring for many hours at a time, broadband ship sound during closer approaches typically lasts from 10 minutes up to 3 hours. Broadband ship sound mainly occurs in the 30 hertz to 10 kilohertz frequency range when a ship passes within a few kilometers of a receiver, and in our case, a hydrophone. And noise can extend above the 10 kilohertz when vessels are very close to the recorders, although sound levels do rapidly decrease above a few kilohertz. So different ships and ship types have different sound profiles, which can vary depending on factors such as the engine's age, propeller size, speed, distance from the receiver, water temperature, and location in regard to depth, bathymetry, and sediment type. This figure on the right is a long-term spectral average, or an LTSA for short. And for those of you wondering, LTSAs are just visual ways of looking at acoustic signals. They provide information on the spectral distribution of a signal over a period of time. And time here is on the x-axis and frequency is on the y-axis. And then the different colors are representing the different intensities of sound. And for this particular LTSA, we have reds and oranges representing louder sounds and blues representing quieter ones. And this particular LTSA is showing you an example of a ship passing. For this project, we used an automated ship detector that was customized for various sites in the Gulf. And as I said, ships have different sound profiles, and it was important to understand the variability that the ship detector needed to be able to handle. So let's go ahead and take a look at various ship profiles now so that you can have some sense of the variability. So here are some examples of cargo ship sound profiles. These in the next few slides are LTSAs, all showing a 3-hour time period. They are showing the sound profiles of different individual ships at different distances and different speeds recorded on different harps, so different locations and different hydrophone depths. And in this case, they came from 4 different locations. You can see the variability in their acoustic profiles. And this is just something that needs to be considered when building an automated ship detector. So the main takeaway I want you to get from this slide and the next few similar slides is just to note how different the profiles can look. And this is important for understanding how the ship detector will work. So here are some profiles for passenger ships. This category of ships can include cruise ships, ferries, ocean liners, and charter fishing vessels or headboats. So it's actually quite a diverse category of ship type. And here we have ships from a more shallow site, but also a site where the hydrophone was at about 280 meters. The ships were traveling at various distances and speeds. And once again, you can see the variability in how their sound profiles look and thus would sound underwater. And here you can see various sound profiles of tankers. Once again, from 2 different locations, one deeper and one shallower, with speeds between 11 to 13 knots on average. And here are some for tugtows. These are from 2 sites, one less than 100 meters depth and the other at 260 meters. And you can see some strong tonal sounds in these as marked by the arrows I just put in. And then finally, here are 4 different ship types. We have a ship associated with diving operations on the far left, followed by a dredging vessel, and then a fishing vessel, and then 2 offshore supply vessels. So you can see that there is great variety in ship sound profiles. And as I said before, this is important to understand when trying to characterize shipping noise and also when customizing automated ship detectors. Let's now look at the objectives of this work. The first objective of this work was to characterize the contribution of shipping noise to the soundscape at various recording sites in the Gulf of Mexico between 2010 and 2021. In order to accomplish this goal, we needed to optimize an automated ship detector for performance across a variety of site locations and noise conditions, and this was to help with the processing of multi-year, multi-site acoustic data sets. Because each site has varying levels of associated noise, a top priority was getting the detector to work in various conditions approximately the same. Our second objective was to determine the ship types that transit near each recording unit. These objectives, which help us to determine the vessel types, their spatial distribution, and their contributions to the Gulf of Mexico soundscape, will help us understand and reduce impacts on marine mammals from shipping noise, which is, like I said before, a chronic anthropogenic noise source. All right, so now let's look at how we went about meeting these objectives. This project involved the need to process multi-year, multi-site acoustic data sets. These data sets were made using high-frequency acoustic recording packages, or HARPs for short. HARPs are autonomous underwater acoustic recording instruments that can record over sounds over a bandwidth from 10 hertz to up to 160 kilohertz and are capable of approximately 1 year of continuous recording. You can see a diagram of a HARP in the lower left-hand corner. Between 2010 and 2021, HARPs were deployed in 5 offshore long-term sites shown here in pink. I will call these the historic sites from now on. These recordings began after the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill in order to gather information on Gulf-wide ambient noise levels and the contributions from anthropogenic noise sources, as well as to gather information on how marine mammals vary over time and space in the Gulf of Mexico. In 2020, HARPs were deployed at 13 sites, which included all but one of the historic sites. 2 of these new sites were located in major shipping lanes, and these are shown by the red circles. We ended up using a combination of automated ship detections found within the 11 years of HARP acoustic recordings and automatic identification system, or AIS data, to help with our objectives of determining the contribution of shipping noise to the Gulf of Mexico soundscape and to determine the ship types that transit near each recording location. Let's first look at the methods for making those automated ship detections in the acoustic recordings. So to analyze the HARP acoustic data for ship noise, I used a modified version of the custom ship sound detector that is built into the MATLAB-based software program called Triton. Triton is a software package for analyzing acoustic data. This ship sound detector allows the user to input a variety of parameters, including frequency band limits, durations, various threshold parameters, and window settings. And you can see an example of the pop-up box that allows you to input these settings on the right. The detector identifies shipping events within LTSAs. And here is another example of an LTSA. Remember, time is on the x-axis and frequency is on the y-axis, and then the different colors are representing the different intensities of sound. So if you look closely, you can see that we have very loud sounds represented by the red and oranges at low frequencies, and those are actually air gun signals. And then we have 3 ship passings, which I just labeled. And then there are some sperm whale clicks, which are here in the circle. Sperm whale clicks generally range in frequency from 1 to 10 kilohertz, or at least that's where most of that energy is. And I'm mentioning sperm whale clicks because the ship sound detector was originally designed to help with sperm whale click analysis. It was designed to run on full bandwidth LTSAs to detect ship noise present in frequency bands overlapping with sperm whale clicks, so that those clicks with overlapping ship noise could be excluded during analysis. However, if you recall, the objective of the work I'm presenting today is not on finding clean sperm whale clicks, but rather on detecting noise from all passing ships, including those with energy that does not extend above 1 kilohertz. Therefore, we made modifications to detect as many ship types of different sound profiles as possible. And while attempting to find the best set of parameters for each site, we determined that using decimated LTSAs with a higher resolution worked better for meeting our objective than using the full bandwidth LTSAs. Because we also wanted to make sure we were able to detect ships with mostly, if not only, lower energy, we were testing out much lower frequency parameters and didn't need to actually extend into those higher frequencies above 5 kilohertz. So instead of using the full bandwidth data that had sampling rates of 200 kilohertz, we ended up using decimated data with sampling rates of 10 kilohertz. So the way the detector works is that within the LTSAs, it examines power spectral density estimates and 3 user-defined frequency bands, such as those seen here. Events meeting 3 conditions based on amplitude above a threshold and duration are logged as a ship passage. We chose frequencies for the 3 user-defined frequency bands to maximize the detection of shipping noise while minimizing the detection of airgun surveys. Upon looking at the detections made by the different settings, we saw that usually 2 different sets of parameters worked well for each site. One set that seemed to pull ships with energy that extended into the higher frequencies, and then a second lower set of frequency parameters that detected ships with lower energy that did not extend much above 1 kilohertz, if at all. Upon this observation, we ended up designing a 2-step detector that used 2 different sets of parameters. And after experimenting with several settings, we chose the best parameters for each site. These optimal settings were chosen based on a comparison to manual ship detections from a subset of data at each site. False positive rates for these settings are currently in development. I will mention at this point that multiple ship passings close in time are typically detected as a single detection. Therefore, the ship detection results, which I'm about to present, represent a minimum count. But after running the detector on each data set, we did evaluate the number of passing ships and the amount of time vessel noise was present. As for the AIS data, these were obtained from marine cadastre and included ship information such as vessel name, vessel type, vessel size, time, as well as position at the time of each detection and other vessel specifics. We use these data to examine the ship types commonly found within 15 kilometers of the deployed HARPs and the distances at which the ships passed each site up to that 15 kilometers. We also assess the detector's performance at detecting ships equipped with AIS by comparing the ship sound detector results to the AIS data. The shipping data results I'm about to present for each site are a combination of the ship detector results and AIS data. So let's first look at the ship counts at the 5 historic sites shown here on this map in the bottom left. The figure in the middle is showing weekly detections by site from 2010 to 2021. And the figure on the right is a violin plot showing the daily detections by site for the same time period. These two figures are based on the results of the automated ship detector only. As you can see, we detected higher numbers of ships at sites GC, MC, and MP. These sites are actually located near major shipping lanes and oil rigs, which you can see here. So you can see the proximity of these sites to shipping lanes in the left figure, and then their proximity to oil rigs, which are the orange symbols, in the right figure. The historic sites are all shown in green, and then the 3 sites with the greatest number of ship detections are shown by the red arrows. So you can note their proximity to the shipping lanes and also oil rigs. The least amount of ship detections occurred at the other 2 sites. In one of those sites, site DC, was in the Rice's whale's core habitat, which if you look on this bottom left figure, it's the seahorse shape in red. Now you might be wondering how the ship detector compared to the AIS data. Let's rescale this middle plot to take into account one particular year, and then you can see how it compares. So here are the AIS data overlaid on the automated ship detector data. Overall, the ship detector had fewer detections than ships counted with AIS data, and this was especially true for sites MC and MP. There are a few reasons for this difference. One is that the ship detector has a hard time picking up certain ships. The main type is tonal ships, as seen here, especially ones that have the lower tone and frequencies greater than 700 Hertz. The ship detector also seemed to perform less well when airgun pulses were very loud. And finally, another reason for this difference in number of detections is that the ship detector does not count overlapping ships separately. At MC and MP, there are many overlapping ships. And especially right after the oil spill in 2010, there were tons of ships at site MC, which you can see in the spike in weekly detections. Site MC was the site closest to where the oil spill occurred, and you can see that here on this map. So the red triangle here is showing the location of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and then the black circles are all the historic HARP locations, and you can see that site MC is the HARP site that is closest to the oil spill. So here are some animations showing ship detections within 15 kilometers of that site MC, which was the closest one to where the Deepwater Horizon oil spill occurred. The animation on the left is showing all types of ships equipped with AIS, whereas the one on the right is showing just the anti-pollution and oil recovery ships. These animations are going to progress month by month, starting in May of 2010, shortly after the explosion, which occurred on April 20th of 2010. Hopefully they will work. And so you can kind of see that a lot of the ship activity early on is from these anti-pollution and oil recovery ships. And that was in October of 2010. That's November. And you can also see that the anti-pollution and oil recovery ships seem to disappear around March of 2011. And then the normal ship activity more or less resumes shortly after that. So it's safe to say that that spike in ships at that particular site were associated with the oil spill. Now let's take a look at what other ship types are found at each of our other sites in general. So here are plots that show the different ship types seen at the 5 historic sites and the distances from the HARPs at which they were seen. The number of ships here is cumulative over the 2010 to 2021 period, except for at site GC, which spans from 2015 to 2021. We have the closest point of approach, or CPA, on the x-axis, and then the number of ships on the y-axis. The y-axes are not on the same scale, but I thought you could see trends better this way. So with that in mind, as you can see, cargo ships were common at all sites except for site GC. And cargo ships are represented with that dark purple or blue color. And they were also the dominant ship type at the site within the Rice's Whale core habitat, which was site DC. Here, they mostly passed at distances greater than 13 kilometers. At site GC, we saw mostly tankers, and those are in the orange color, and those mainly passed within 5 kilometers. Site GC also had a lot of offshore supply vessels, which are in the bluish color, bluish green color. And then research vessels, which do include those doing seismic surveys, are also common at that site at distances greater than 10 kilometers, and they're more of that brown orange color. Site MC had a diversity of ship types, including cargo ships, passenger ships, offshore supply vessels, and tug tows. And there was an increase in ship passings farther away, starting at approximately 8 kilometers. Site MP had mostly passenger ships, represented by that more greenish color. And they did occur at all distances from the heart. And we also saw a peak in cargo ships and offshore supply vessels at 11 kilometers. It's actually not too surprising that sites MC and MP had ship types associated with oil rigs, given their proximity to them, as you can see in this figure. And by ship types associated with oil rigs, I'm talking mainly about passenger ships and offshore supply vessels. And then finally, site DT, which was near a shipping lane, had primarily cargo ships, tankers, and tug tows, with most ships transiting greater than 5 kilometers away. And there was a peak in ships passing between 12 and 14 kilometers. And here's another plot showing the percentage of the total ships per site by ship type category. Once again, as mentioned on the previous slide, the major ship types at the 5 historic HARP locations were cargo ships, offshore supply vessels, passenger ships, tankers, and tug tows. Many smaller vessels, like fishing vessels, do not typically have AIS and thus are underrepresented as a category here. So I've now shown you the results for the ship counts and ship types at the historic sites, but here are figures showing ship presence or the duration of ship noise. Here I've got a similar figure in the middle as before, except this time it is showing weekly durations of ship noise in hours. And then the violin plot on the right is showing daily duration. These durations were based on the ship detector results only, mainly because that tells us the amount of time that ship noise was elevated above a certain threshold compared to the ambient noise level. If we had used AIS data for this plot, sites near oil rigs would have shown elevated durations that do not necessarily correspond to elevated noise levels from ships, because some ships related to oil rigs are present for long durations, even days at a time. And these ships are likely docked or sitting, as they have speeds between 0 and 1 knots. Also, noise levels from ships that are farther from the HARP might not be above the threshold due to distance. So that is why we are presenting the ship detector results here. I would also like to mention, however, that once again, overlapping ships that occur over long time periods will lead to an underestimation here, as the background noise level would be elevated and the ability for detecting individual ships would be lessened depending on the parameter defined for the window size. But taking all that into consideration, you can see from these figures that the duration of ship noise was found to be greater at sites GC and MP as found by the automated ship detector. All right, moving on to our 2020 to 2021 sites. This figure is showing the ship detector results for those sites, and it is showing the weekly number of detections. I've not included the weekly durations, just to make it simpler for the slide, but they do match closely with the ship counts for these sites. And all the y-axis scales are the same, except for those bottom two, sites GA and SL, which were the sites located within major shipping lanes. These data indicate that the highest number of detections and longest durations of ship noise presence occurred at those shipping lane sites. And you can see their location on this map, where the purple is representing ship tracks. Sites AC, MR, and Y1B also had elevated numbers of nearby ship transits, and this was likely due to their proximity to ports and shipping lanes. And once again, you can see that this map. And then sites LC, CE, Y1C, and Y1D had fewer ships detected, as well as lower durations of ship noise presence. This is not unexpected, as these sites were not as close to shipping lanes, or at least major ones, as you can see. I should note that the lighter levels of traffic in the Mexican waters may be real, or may be an artifact of lower AIS receiver coverage. However, with that said, it does seem to be matching with what the ship detector has found. All right, so once again, here are those plots showing the different ship types seen at the 2020 to 2021 sites and the distances from the HARPs that they were seen. The number of ships here is only for the 2020 to 2021 period. And as before, the closest point of approach is on the x-axis and the number of ships is on the y-axis. The y-axes are again not on the same scale. And this time you might be noticing that the number of ship type categories on the right is less than before. This is because starting in 2018, certain ship types were removed and lumped together in an other category. These included industrial ships, mobile offshore drilling units, offshore supply vessels, and research vessels. I am currently making a database, or a master list, so to say, so that we can try to divide that other category back up again into the previous ship types, but that's still a work in progress. So anyway, for now, what these data are showing us is that cargo ships were common at all sites once again, except for site GC. And as we previously saw, cargo ships were the dominant ship type at site DC, mostly passing at distances greater than 13 kilometers. But we also saw that these were the major ship types at sites CE, LC, MR, and SL. And for SL, this was especially true within 2 kilometers. And remember, SL was one of the shipping lane sites. Sites MR and SL also had large numbers of tankers. Those are the orange colors. These tankers passed at relatively similar distances at site MR and passed mostly within 2 kilometers at site SL. Actually, at site SL, the proportion of ships started to favor passenger ships after 3 kilometers. And this was also the distance at which the number of ships passing significantly decreased. Sites AC, GC, and GA had mostly tankers, which mainly passed 8 to 9 kilometers away at site AC, mostly within 5 kilometers at site GC, and within 2 kilometers at site GA. The number of ships passing by site GA, which once again was a shipping lane site, significantly dropped after 3 kilometers, similar to how it did at the other shipping lane site. As we saw previously, site DT, which was near a shipping lane, if you remember, had primarily cargo ships, tankers, and tug-tows. Site Y1B had mostly cargo ships and tankers with similar numbers at all distances. And then site Y1D had a variety of ship types, including cargo ships, fishing vessels, pleasure vessels, tankers, and tug-tows. Lastly, it is important to note that the AIS data were very low for sites CE, LC, and Y1C, but it is possible that that could be due to the low AIS receiver coverage, as I mentioned before, although once again, the ship detector results seem to imply that there actually were less ships there. So here are some pie charts recapping what I just showed you in terms of ship types. These data are cumulative over the time period that the HARPs were actually out for each site. And you will notice that cargo ships and tankers, cargo ships in the dark purple blue again, and tankers in the orange, are the most common ship type overall. However, at these 4 sites, we did see a variety of ship types, and that's probably due to their proximity to the oil rigs. And then these sites circled now also saw a lot of near transits of tug-tows, which are in the yellow color. So the analyses that we have done in regard to shipping noise detections and AIS ship track data show that there is a high amount of shipping activity in the Gulf of Mexico. As expected, the greatest number of ship detections and longest time with ship noise present was found to occur at the 2 shipping lane sites. Other locations near shipping lanes, ports, and oil rigs also had high numbers of ships as well, while those farther away from shipping lanes had the least number of ship detections. We also found that different sites had different ship types that were most common. Sites near shipping lanes saw lots of tankers, cargo ships, and tug-tows. while those sites near oil rigs saw elevated numbers of passenger ships and offshore supply vessels. It is important to determine the vessel types, their spatial distribution, and their contributions to the Gulf of Mexico soundscape, because this will provide important information toward understanding and reducing impacts on marine mammals from chronic anthropogenic noise sources. Some next steps for this project we will be working on include calculating receive levels for all ship detections. We found a strong correlation between air gun receive levels and ship receive levels when we first looked into this. We had originally calculated these receive levels from LTSAs as part of the modified ship detector, but because of all the seismic activity, we found that this was not really an effective method since LTSAs are made from 5-second averages. So we are now looking into ways of going into the raw data and removing times with seismic pulses from the calculations. We are also working on calculating precision and recall rates for each data set from a small subset of data manually inspected for ships. And this will help us understand how reliable our ship counts and durations are. We can then take a better look at which sites have more non-AIS associated detections, which could be from smaller vessels without AIS or from areas that have lower coverage of AIS receivers. There's obviously a lot one can do with all the data we have collected. Another thing we can look at is which ships transit through the Gulf of Mexico tens to hundreds of times. These plots are showing individual ships on the x-axis, and then the number of times they were within 15 kilometers of a HARP on the y-axis. Each plot is for a different ship type category, and while these plots do not show if these vessels come year after year, that's something that could easily be looked into. And for these individual ships that do transit through the area numerous times, we can see if they appear in the shipping lane data and then look into their source levels. These ships might be good ones to focus on since they spend a lot of time in the Gulf, and therefore this information could help in finding ways to reduce noise. So I hope today I've given you a sense of what the shipping noise in the Gulf of Mexico is like and what future directions need to be taken in order to continue to understand its contributions to the Gulf soundscape. This is just one component of an interdisciplinary project focused on helping the Gulf's marine mammals recover from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. But by taking a closer look at these and other man-made sounds, we are able to begin understanding what the sources and levels of noise are that occur in important marine mammal habitats. This information is important in the development of noise reduction projects that can help reduce the impacts from such dominant noise sources and for monitoring changes in noise levels in the future. These data can also be incorporated into habitat modeling efforts to see if they can be used as predictors for marine mammal occurrence. Such predictive habitat models can assess the processes driving seasonal, interannual, and decadal trends in spatial distribution, density, and abundance of oceanic cetaceans. And with that, I wanted to just thank everyone who helped with the project. This work could obviously not have been done with the help of many people listed here very generally, I realize. I've also listed the funding sources for this work below. So thank you. And I guess at this point in time, I can take questions.
Lynne, that was absolutely fascinating work. And I do want to point everybody to the Slido. It's on your screen right now for any questions that you have.
So it looks like we have the question, is someone cross-analyzing local mammal population rates with noise activity to see if there's a correlation, and how much do you think this noise is impacting the animals?
Good question. Yes, that is something that is being looked at and will be looked at in the future. This project it took a long time to analyze all the data, obviously. There are the SIO analysts have done a great job figuring out which marine mammals are occurring where, their distribution. And now all of this information just needs to be put in to a model together to see if the noise is actually impacting the animals. That has not been done yet, but it is something that is about to be looked into.
Lynne, as we're waiting for more questions to come in, You said that there are ways that we can use this to protect the animals in the future. Sort of, could you expand a little bit more on what all the options are to protect them? And also, we obviously need buy-in from the shipping companies. So have you had discussions with them to see if there is buy-in from them and that they prepare to make changes if need be?
So I have not been personally involved in those conversations, but such conversations are happening and have happened and will continue to happen. And I guess the piece of the project that I'm working on is just, showing where the higher levels of ship noise might occur. I'm still looking into the received levels, but another piece is looking at just the ambient soundscape, and you can kind of see where the distant shipping noise occurs throughout. And I think by looking at the thought is that by looking at individual ships that pass by lots of times, we might be able to contact them to see if there are ways that perhaps they could be quieter. But these are just, thoughts. What we have found, we've also looked at seismic airgun pulses, and those are actually very dominating. And it's amazing how far those sounds can travel in the Gulf. The ship sounds, I mean, you can see the distant ship sounds. The detector won't pick them up necessarily if they're too far away because they just kind of blend in. But those airgun pulses can be heard across the whole Gulf from one survey. So I think that is also being looked into.
Okay, it looks like we have a follow-up question. Based on what you understand now with this data, where do you think a solution might lie, like limiting airgun pulses?
That is another excellent question. So some of the work that we just put out a technical report, and it was interesting. My supervisor at NOAA just presented on this, and what was found was that while most seismic surveys can be heard at multiple HARP sites all throughout the Gulf, like the same airgun pulses, there was an event that didn't occur at, so we don't know what's going on there. So it might just be a different type of airgun pulse, and maybe that could be something to be looked into. As far as shipping, ships do have to actually, come and go, but especially near critical habitats, there might be a solution with looking at possibly limiting traffic, like near the rice as well. Habitat, not much ship traffic goes there anyway. So if we find other critical habitats, maybe something like that could happen again.
Well, with that lovely note on the screen, I want to echo that. Thank you very much, Lynne. This was fascinating science that you're doing, and I'm really looking forward to see more of this as we go forward. I also want to thank for everybody that joined us today for our Discovery Seminar series. And I want to point you to our website, CPAESS, CPAESS.UCAR.edu. And you can find the YouTube of this talk uploaded there after the end of the day. And we would like to remind you that we're going to have our next CPAESS Discovery Series on March 22nd. So we hope to see you there for March 22nd. And with that, another thank you very much, Lynne, and thank you to Brett and our CPAESS staff in the background that made sure this was run smoothly today. Thanks, everybody.